Have you ever felt like the world turned its back on you? Like everything you thought you knew was suddenly ripped away, leaving you stranded, alone with nothing but your own strength to rely on? That's exactly what happened to Lauren Mitchell. 8 months pregnant, abandoned in the dead of night, and left to face a storm that would change her life forever. But this isn't just a story about survival, it's about how one woman found the courage to rise stronger than ever before. Let me tell you her journey. The sleek black luxury car cut through the deserted highway like a blade slicing through darkness. The engine purred softly, its sound almost soothing against the eerie silence of the night. There were no stars in the sky, just an endless expanse of blackness that seemed to press down on the world below. Lauren Mitchell sat in the passenger seat, her hands resting protectively over her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant and feeling every ounce of it, she shifted uncomfortably, trying to find relief from the dull ache in her lower back. Ethan, her husband, gripped the steering wheel tightly as he drove with single-minded focus. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed straight ahead, betraying none of the emotions swirling beneath the surface. He hadn't said more than 2 words since they left their penthouse apartment hours ago. For Lauren, this wasn't unusual. Ethan had always been ambitious, driven by goals that often felt bigger than life itself. But lately, his ambition had turned into something colder, something distant. It made her heart ache in ways she couldn't quite explain. Lauren glanced at him now, studying the sharp angles of his face illuminated faintly by the dashboard lights. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, breaking the suffocating quiet. "Can we stop soon? I really need to use the restroom." He didn't respond immediately, his gaze unwavering as he stared out at the empty road ahead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed heavily, the sound laced with irritation. "Fine," he muttered under his breath, flicking on the turn signal as a dimly lit gas station appeared on the horizon. The car slowed to a stop near one of the pumps, and Lauren unbuckled her seatbelt with a mixture of relief and trepidation. She opened the door carefully, wincing slightly as the cool night air hit her skin. Her legs felt heavy as she stepped out, but she managed to steady herself before walking toward the small convenience store attached to the gas station. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. A bored-looking teenager stood behind the counter, scrolling through his phone without so much as glancing up as Lauren entered. She headed straight for the restroom, pushing open the creaky door and stepping inside. The room was tiny and smelled faintly of bleach, but it was clean enough. Lauren washed her hands quickly, splashing cold water onto her face to wake herself up. As she dried her hands on a paper towel, she caught sight of her reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a loose bun, strands escaping here and there to frame her tired face. Dark circles lingered beneath her blue eyes, evidence of restless nights spent worrying about everything, and nothing, all at once. She leaned closer to the mirror, whispering softly to herself. "Just a little longer." It was a mantra she'd repeated countless times over the past few months, though she wasn't entirely sure who she was trying to convince, herself or the baby growing inside her. Life with Ethan hadn't been easy, not even before the pregnancy. But deep down, she still believed they could make it work. They had to make it work. Taking a deep breath, Lauren smoothed down her blouse and opened the restroom door. She stepped outside, expecting to see the familiar silhouette of their car waiting for her. Instead, the parking lot was empty. Her heart skipped a beat. "Ethan," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. She scanned the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of him nearby. Maybe he'd gone inside to grab something. Or perhaps he was just around the corner, checking the tires or refueling. But as the seconds ticked by and no sign of him appeared, panic began to creep in. Lauren walked briskly toward the front of the building, her heels clicking against the pavement. The teenager at the counter barely looked up as she passed, too absorbed in whatever was on his screen to notice her growing distress. "Excuse me," she said, forcing her tone to remain calm despite the storm brewing inside her. "Did you happen to see a man leave? Tall, dark hair, driving a black car?" The boy shrugged indifferently. "Nah, haven't seen anyone." Lauren's stomach churned. She stepped back outside, clutching her arms tightly around herself as if trying to hold herself together. The night air felt colder now, biting at her exposed skin. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Had something happened to Ethan? Was he hurt? Or... No. She shook her head firmly, refusing to entertain the darker thoughts creeping into her mind. Ethan wouldn't just leave her here, not like this. Not when she was 8 months pregnant and completely dependent on him. Would he? A wave of nausea hit her suddenly, and she stumbled backward, leaning against the wall for support. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, blurring her vision. She blinked them away furiously, determined not to give in to despair. "Think, Lauren," she whispered to herself. "You can figure this out." But as the minutes dragged on and the reality of her situation sank in, one thing became painfully clear: Ethan was gone. And she was alone. Lauren stood frozen in the dim glow of the gas station's flickering neon sign. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she stared out into the empty parking lot, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The silence around her felt suffocating now, pressing against her chest like an invisible weight. She reached instinctively for her phone, fumbling with it as her fingers trembled. "No, no, this can't be happening," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her thumb swiped across the screen, unlocking the device. She opened the messaging app and scrolled through their conversation history, searching desperately for some kind of explanation. But there was nothing, no missed call, no voicemail, no indication that Ethan had even considered stopping to explain why he'd left her here. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest as she tapped his name, initiating a new message. "Ethan? Where are you?" She hit send, watching the little dots that indicated he was typing appear almost immediately. For a brief moment, hope flared within her, a foolish, fleeting spark that maybe this was all just some terrible misunderstanding. Maybe he'd pulled over somewhere nearby and would come back for her any second now. But then the response came, cold and final: "We're done. Take care of yourself." The words hit Lauren like a punch to the gut. She read them again, her vision blurring as tears welled up in her eyes. "Done?" she choked out loud, her voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "What do you mean, done?" Before she could type another reply, another notification popped up on her screen. This time, it wasn't a text, it was a photo. Lauren hesitated for a split second before opening it, dreading what she might see. And when the image loaded, her worst fears were confirmed. It was Ethan, standing on a pristine white sand beach, dressed casually in linen pants and a loose shirt. He looked relaxed, happy even, his arm draped casually around the shoulders of a beautiful woman with long dark hair and sunglasses perched atop her head. They were smiling at the camera, oblivious to the chaos they'd unleashed. Lauren's stomach churned violently as she zoomed in on the photo, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The background revealed a luxury resort, complete with palm trees swaying gently in the breeze and turquoise waves lapping at the shore. It was paradise, and Ethan was living it while she was stranded alone in the middle of nowhere. Her knees buckled slightly, and she leaned heavily against the wall of the gas station, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Who is she?" Lauren muttered bitterly, staring at the woman in the picture. She didn't recognize her, but something about her face seemed vaguely familiar, as if she'd seen her somewhere before. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the parking lot, carrying with it the first drops of rain. At first, it was just a light sprinkle, but within moments, the heavens opened up, unleashing a torrential downpour. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the desolate highway stretching endlessly in both directions. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, echoing like a warning. Lauren shivered as the cold rain soaked through her thin blouse, plastering her hair to her face. She glanced around frantically, searching for shelter or some semblance of help, but the gas station offered little protection. The teenager behind the counter had disappeared, leaving her completely alone. "This can't be real," she murmured, hugging herself tightly as she tried to stay upright. "This has to be a nightmare." And then it happened. A sharp, searing pain shot through her abdomen, causing her to double over with a gasp. She clutched her belly instinctively, her breath hitching as another wave of agony washed over her. It was unlike anything she'd ever experienced, a deep, relentless cramping that made her legs feel weak and unstable. "Oh God," she whimpered, sinking to her knees on the wet pavement. Her mind raced with panic as she realized what was happening. Contractions. "No, no, no," she cried, shaking her head furiously despite the pain. "It's too early. Please, not now." The rain continued to pour down relentlessly, mixing with her tears as she struggled to breathe through the contractions. Each one came faster and stronger than the last, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. She knew she needed help, medical attention, but there was no one here to call, no one who could hear her cries for assistance. Desperation clawed at her throat as she forced herself to focus. "Think, Lauren. You have to think." With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone again, praying for a signal. The screen flickered weakly, showing only one bar of service. She dialed 911, her fingers slipping on the wet surface of the device. Come on," she pleaded as the line rang once, twice, 3 times. Finally, a voice answered on the other end. 911 Emergency Services. "What's your location?" I don't know," Lauren stammered, her voice breaking. "I'm at a gas station, but I don't know where. There's no one here, and I'm having contractions. My baby, it's coming." "Ma'am, try to stay calm. Can you describe your surroundings? Any landmarks?" Lauren looked around frantically, her vision blurred by tears and rain. There's a big red sign. It says, Petro Stop. That's all I can see." "Okay, we'll locate you. Help is on the way. In the meantime, find somewhere safe to wait." "Safe?" Lauren echoed hullily, glancing at the empty highway and the pouring rain. "There's nowhere safe." She hung up the call, her body racked with another contraction. This one was worse than the last, forcing a strangled cry from her lips. She crawled toward the edge of the building, seeking whatever meager shelter it provided, and curled into a ball on the cold, wet ground. As the storm raged around her, Lauren closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer, for strength, for survival, for her unborn child. The rain continued to pour in relentless sheets, drenching everything it touched. Lauren lay curled up against the wall of the gas station, her soaked clothes clinging to her trembling body. Her breath came in ragged gasps as another contraction tore through her, leaving her weak and disoriented. The world around her seemed to blur into a haze of pain and despair, but somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope remained. She had called for help, they were coming. But how long would it take? Minutes? Hours? Through the deafening sound of the storm, she thought she heard something, a distant rumble that wasn't thunder. Squinting through the rain, she saw headlights cutting through the darkness, moving slowly along the highway. Her heart leapt at the sight, and she forced herself to stand, swaying unsteadily on her feet. Please stop," she whispered hoarsely, raising one arm weakly to wave. The truck slowed as it approached, its tires splashing through puddles that had formed on the asphalt. For a moment, Lauren feared it might drive past without stopping, abandoning her to the merciless night. But then the vehicle pulled over to the side of the road, its engine idling softly. A man stepped out, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim glow of the truck's interior lights. He wore a dark jacket with the hood pulled up to shield him from the rain, but even in the poor visibility, Lauren could see the concern etched across his face. His eyes scanned the scene quickly before landing on her, soaked, shivering, and clearly in distress. "Are you okay?" he called out, his voice steady yet tinged with urgency. Lauren shook her head, tears streaming down her face as she took a stumbling step forward. I need help. My baby." Without hesitation, the man rushed toward her, catching her just as her legs gave way beneath her. His arms steadied her, strong and reassuring, as he guided her toward the warmth of the truck. "I've got you," he said firmly, his tone calm but commanding. "You're safe now. Just hold on." Lauren clung to him, her fingers gripping his jacket like a lifeline. Her vision blurred as exhaustion and pain overwhelmed her senses. She tried to speak, to explain what had happened, but all that came out was a broken whisper, "He left me." The man didn't press her for details. Instead, he helped her into the passenger seat of the truck, carefully adjusting the seatbelt around her swollen belly. The interior of the vehicle smelled faintly of leather and coffee, a comforting contrast to the cold, wet chaos outside. "My name's Daniel," he said gently, closing the door behind her before climbing into the driver's seat. "I'm an ER doctor. I'll do everything I can to help you." Lauren nodded weakly, her head lolling against the headrest as another wave of pain washed over her. She wanted to thank him, to tell him how grateful she was, but the words caught in her throat. Her eyelids fluttered shut, heavy with fatigue, and despite her best efforts to stay awake, consciousness began to slip away. "Stay with me," Daniel urged, his voice cutting through the fog clouding her mind. "Talk to me. What's your name?" "Lauren," she managed to murmur, her lips barely moving. "That's good, Lauren. Keep breathing. You're doing great." But the effort was too much. The combination of labor pains, emotional turmoil, and sheer physical exhaustion proved overwhelming. As the truck rumbled forward, heading toward the nearest hospital, Lauren succumbed to the darkness pulling at the edges of her awareness. Her last coherent thought was of Daniel's voice, steady, kind, and full of promise. Daniel glanced over at Lauren as her head lolled to the side, her breathing shallow but steady. He reached out to check her pulse, his trained hands moving efficiently despite the gravity of the situation. "She's still with us," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. The rain hammered against the windshield, but Daniel's focus remained unwavering. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, navigating the slick roads with precision. Years of working in emergency medicine had taught him to remain calm under pressure, but this felt different. There was something about Lauren's vulnerability, her quiet desperation, that tugged at his heartstrings in a way he hadn't expected. As the miles passed, Daniel kept talking to her, even though she couldn't hear him. "You're going to be okay, Lauren," he said softly, his gaze flicking between the road and her pale face. "You and your baby, you're fighters. I can see it." He didn't know her story, not yet, but he could guess enough from the state she was in. Abandoned, alone, and in the throes of labor, she had somehow managed to survive until help arrived. That took strength. The GPS on his dashboard indicated they were less than 10 minutes away from the hospital. Daniel pressed down slightly on the accelerator, determined to get her there as quickly as possible. Every second counted now. In the passenger seat, Lauren stirred faintly, her brow furrowing as if troubled by dreams or memories. Daniel reached over to adjust the heater, ensuring she stayed warm despite her soaking wet clothes. "Hang in there," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the storm. "We're almost there." And with that promise, he pushed aside any lingering doubts or fears, focusing solely on the task ahead. Whatever challenges lay in store, for Lauren, for her baby, and perhaps even for himself, he was ready to face them head-on. Lauren's eyes fluttered open slowly, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room piercing through her grogginess. For a moment, she wasn't sure where she was, or even who she was. Her mind felt foggy, disjointed, like pieces of a puzzle scattered across a table. She blinked several times, trying to focus on her surroundings. The sterile white walls, the rhythmic beeping of machines, and the faint smell of antiseptic told her one thing: she was in a hospital. But how had she gotten here? And where was her baby? Panic began to rise in her chest as fragmented memories flooded back: the rain, the pain, the stranger named Daniel. Had her baby been born? Was everything okay? Her heart raced as she tried to sit up, only to find her body weak and uncooperative. "Hey, take it easy," a calm voice said from beside her. Lauren turned her head sharply, startled by the presence of someone else in the room. It took her a moment to recognize him, the man from the gas station. Daniel. He sat in a chair near her bed, his arms crossed loosely over his chest, his expression soft but alert. "You're safe now," he assured her, leaning forward slightly. "You're at St. Mary's Hospital. Do you remember what happened?" Lauren shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Is my baby okay?" Daniel nodded, his tone gentle but firm. "Your baby's stable. It's a boy, he's in the NICU right now because he came early, but the doctors are monitoring him closely. He's strong, Lauren." A sob escaped her lips, half relief, half overwhelming emotion. She covered her face with trembling hands, unable to process everything all at once. "What about me?" she asked after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. Am I okay?" "You'll need some time to recover," Daniel explained. "The delivery was tough, and your body went through a lot. But yes, you're going to be fine. You just need rest." Lauren nodded numbly, her gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a gray, overcast morning. The world looked washed out, drained of color, much like how she felt inside. "I don't understand," she murmured, more to herself than to Daniel. "How did I get here? What happened after?" Her voice trailed off, but Daniel seemed to know exactly what she meant. "I brought you here," he said simply. "When I found you at the gas station, you were in bad shape. You passed out in my truck, so I drove straight to the nearest hospital. They took care of the rest." Lauren stared at him, gratitude and confusion warring within her. "Why did you help me? You didn't have to do that." Daniel hesitated for a moment, his jaw tightening ever so slightly before he answered. "Because no one should go through something like that alone. Especially not someone in your condition." His words struck a chord deep inside her, reopening wounds she'd been trying desperately to ignore. Tears spilled down her cheeks again, and this time, she didn't bother wiping them away. "He left me," she whispered brokenly, her voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. "Ethan, he just left me there. At the gas station. Alone." Daniel's expression darkened, his hands clenching into fists briefly before he forced himself to relax. His silence spoke volumes, silent fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Did he know you were in labor?" Daniel asked, his tone measured but laced with restrained anger. Lauren nodded, choking back another sob. "He knew. He knew everything. We were supposed to be starting our life together, but then." She couldn't finish the sentence, her emotions too raw, too overwhelming. Instead, she pulled out her phone from the small tray beside her bed and handed it to Daniel. On the screen was the photo Ethan had sent, the one of him with the woman at the beach resort. Daniel studied the image carefully, his brow furrowing as he absorbed every detail. When he finally looked up at Lauren, his eyes burned with quiet intensity. "This isn't just abandonment," he said quietly. "This is cruelty." Lauren buried her face in her hands, shaking her head. "I don't understand how he could do this. How could he leave me, and our baby, like that? What kind of person does that make him? It doesn't matter what kind of person he is, Daniel replied firmly. What matters is who you are. You're a survivor, Lauren. You made it through last night when most people wouldn't have. That says more about you than anything else ever could. His words caught her off guard, cutting through the haze of despair that had settled over her. She looked at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but all she saw was genuine compassion. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. For everything. Daniel gave her a small, reassuring smile. You don't have to thank me. Just focus on getting better, for yourself and for your son. Lauren nodded, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. Can I see him? My baby? Soon, Daniel promised. The nurses will bring him in once they've finished checking him over. Until then, try to rest. You've earned it. As if on cue, a nurse entered the room, carrying a clipboard and offering Lauren a warm smile. Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell. How are you feeling? Tired, Lauren admitted, her voice hoarse. That's completely normal, the nurse reassured her. Your body's been through quite an ordeal. We'll keep monitoring you both closely, but for now, just take it easy. The nurse exchanged a few words with Daniel before leaving the room, closing the door softly behind her. Lauren watched her go, then turned back to Daniel, who hadn't moved from his seat. You don't have to stay, she said quietly. You've already done so much for me. Daniel shook his head, his expression unwavering. I'm not going anywhere, not until I know you're okay. His words wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, easing some of the fear and loneliness that had plagued her since the night before. For the first time in hours, maybe even days, Lauren allowed herself to believe that she wasn't entirely alone. Ethan Mitchell leaned back in the plush lounge chair of his luxury beachfront villa, sipping on a cocktail as he scrolled through his phone. The sun was setting over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a perfect backdrop for what should have been the start of his new life. Beside him, Vanessa Carter lounged lazily, her long legs stretched out across the cushioned seat. They had spent the past few days indulging in everything money could buy, fine dining, private yacht excursions, and endless rounds of champagne. But Ethan's smug satisfaction began to falter when his phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. At first, he dismissed them as irrelevant, likely just more congratulatory messages from colleagues or acquaintances impressed by his bold escape from responsibility. But as he opened Instagram, his blood ran cold. A video clip dominated his feed, accompanied by hashtags that made his stomach churn, #Justice for Lauren, #Abandoned Pregnant Wife, #Ethan Mitchell Exposed. What the hell is this? Ethan muttered under his breath, tapping on the video to play it. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. It showed Lauren standing outside the gas station in the pouring rain, waving desperately at passing cars before collapsing onto the wet pavement. Someone had captured the entire scene on their phone, likely an employee or passerby who'd uploaded it online without thinking twice. Within hours, the video had gone viral, racking up millions of views and sparking outrage across social media platforms. Look at this, Ethan snapped, shoving his phone toward Vanessa. Some idiot posted security footage of Lauren at that damn gas station. People are losing their minds over it. Vanessa glanced at the screen briefly before rolling her eyes. So? Let them talk. It's not like anyone can trace it back to us directly. That's not the point. Ethan shot back, his voice rising sharply. This is bad press for me, for my company. Investors don't want drama, they want stability. If this keeps spreading. He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Already, he could see comments flooding in beneath the video, angry messages calling him every name in the book, accusations of cowardice, selfishness, and cruelty. Some users even shared screenshots of the photo he'd sent Lauren, pointing out the luxury resort and mocking him for abandoning his pregnant wife while living it up with another woman. This is ridiculous, Ethan growled, slamming his fist against the armrest. I didn't do anything wrong. She wasn't happy anyway, we both know that. I gave her everything she wanted, money, security, a damn mansion to live in. What more did she expect? Vanessa raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by his rant. You left her stranded in the middle of nowhere while she was 8 months pregnant. That doesn't exactly scream thoughtful husband. She'll survive, Ethan snapped defensively. She always does. And besides, she has no proof it was me driving away. No one saw me leave her there. Vanessa sighed dramatically, sitting up straighter as she studied him with thinly veiled disdain. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't about proof, it's about perception. Right now, the world sees you as a monster. And trust me, that kind of reputation sticks. Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed again, this time with an email alert from his CFO. His heart sank as he opened the message, reading the subject line, Urgent, Investor Withdrawal Notice. The email was brief but devastating. Several major investors had pulled out of his tech startup, citing concerns about recent publicity issues and questioning his leadership capabilities. Worse still, stock prices were plummeting, dragging the value of his company down with them. No, Ethan whispered, scrolling frantically through financial news apps to confirm the damage. Sure enough, headlines screamed about his plummeting net worth. Ethan Mitchell's empire crumbles amid scandal. Investors flee as CEO faces backlash over abandoned wife. His hands trembled as he set the phone down, his mind racing with panic. How had things spiraled so far out of control in such a short amount of time? You're screwed, Vanessa said bluntly, interrupting his thoughts. What? Ethan turned to her, incredulous. What are you talking about? I'm saying your golden boy image is toast, Vanessa replied coolly, standing up and brushing sand off her designer swimsuit. And frankly, you're not worth the trouble anymore. Ethan stared at her, disbelief etched across his face. Wait, what are you doing? Cutting my losses, Vanessa said with a shrug, grabbing her oversized tote bag and slipping on her sunglasses. You were fun while it lasted, Ethan, but I'm not sticking around to watch you crash and burn. Find someone else to clean up your mess. With that, she walked away, leaving Ethan alone on the balcony as the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in years, he felt truly powerless. As night fell, Ethan retreated inside, pacing anxiously as he tried to salvage what remained of his crumbling empire. He called lawyers, PR teams, anyone who might help mitigate the fallout, but it was too late. By morning, the media storm had reached a fever pitch, with reporters camped outside his properties and paparazzi trailing his every move. Within days, Ethan lost everything, his company, his fortune, his reputation. The man who had once been celebrated as a self-made millionaire was now a pariah, vilified by the same public that had once admired him. And somewhere deep down, he knew he deserved it. The days following Lauren's hospital stay passed in a blur of exhaustion and healing. Her son, whom she had named Noah after her late grandfather, was thriving in the NICU, growing stronger with each passing day. Visiting him became Lauren's sole purpose, her anchor in a world that still felt unsteady and unfamiliar. But even as she held his tiny hand through the incubator's opening, gratitude swelling in her chest for his resilience, there was an underlying ache within her. She didn't have a home to take him to. She didn't have anyone waiting for them outside those hospital walls. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. He always seemed to notice things about her, the way her shoulders tensed when someone mentioned Ethan, the faint tremor in her voice when she talked about leaving the hospital, the quiet sadness that lingered in her eyes no matter how hard she tried to smile. One evening, as Lauren sat in the hospital cafeteria sipping lukewarm tea, Daniel joined her at the table without asking. He carried 2 steaming cups of coffee, one for himself and one for her, and placed the second cup gently beside her mug. You look like you could use something stronger than tea, he said with a small, reassuring smile. Lauren managed a weak laugh, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic cup. Thanks. I think I need all the caffeine I can get these days. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the hum of conversation and clinking utensils filling the background. Then Daniel cleared his throat, his tone shifting to something more serious. Lauren, he began, his voice steady but kind, have you thought about where you're going to go once Noah's ready to leave the hospital? Her grip tightened slightly on the coffee cup, and she looked down at the table, avoiding his gaze. I don't know yet. I haven't really figured that part out. Daniel nodded slowly, as if he'd expected this answer. You're welcome to stay with me, for as long as you need. My house is big enough, and it's quiet. You wouldn't have to worry about anything except taking care of yourself and Noah. Lauren's head snapped up, surprise flickering across her face. What? No, I couldn't impose like that. You've already done so much for us. It's not an imposition, Daniel insisted firmly. You're not imposing, you're giving me a chance to help. And honestly, I'd feel better knowing you weren't alone right now. Starting over isn't easy, especially after everything you've been through. She hesitated, chewing on her lower lip as conflicting emotions swirled inside her. On one hand, the idea of accepting such generosity from someone she barely knew felt overwhelming, almost too good to be true. But on the other hand, the thought of being alone, with no support system, no safe place to call her own, terrified her. I don't want to burden you, she murmured finally, her voice tinged with uncertainty. You're not a burden, Daniel replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. And if you're worried about owing me, don't be. Helping people is what I do, it's who I am. Besides, Noah needs stability. So do you. His words struck a chord deep within her, resonating with a longing she hadn't allowed herself to fully acknowledge. Stability. Safety. A fresh start. Was it possible? Could she trust him? After a long pause, Lauren nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. Okay, she whispered. Thank you, Daniel. For everything. 2 days later, Lauren found herself standing on the front porch of Daniel's home, cradling Noah in his car seat while Daniel unlocked the door. The house was nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood, its exterior painted a soft gray with white trim and flower boxes bursting with vibrant blooms. It looked cozy, inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment of the hospital. Welcome, Daniel said warmly, pushing open the door and stepping aside to let her enter. Lauren stepped inside cautiously, her eyes widening as she took in the space. The living room was bathed in natural light streaming through large windows, highlighting shelves lined with books of every genre imaginable. A plush beige couch sat beneath a framed map of the world, flanked by mismatched armchairs draped with soft knit blankets. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and vanilla candles, creating an atmosphere that felt both comforting and lived in. This is amazing, Lauren breathed, turning to Daniel with a tentative smile. It feels like home. Daniel finished for her, his expression softening. She nodded, clutching Noah's car seat a little tighter. Yeah. It does. He gestured toward the staircase. Let me show you to your room. I set it up for you and Noah, it's got everything you'll need for now. As they climbed the stairs, Lauren couldn't help but marvel at how thoughtful Daniel had been. The guest bedroom was decorated in soothing shades of blue and cream, with a crib already assembled in the corner and a rocking chair positioned near the window. A changing table stocked with diapers and baby essentials stood ready, along with a stack of folded blankets and onesies neatly arranged on a dresser. I wasn't sure what you'd prefer, Daniel admitted, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. So I just went with neutral colors. If you want to change anything, feel free. Lauren shook her head, tears threatening to spill over again. It's perfect. More than perfect. Thank you, Daniel. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't have to, he said simply, his voice filled with sincerity. Just focus on getting better, for you and for Noah. That's all the repayment I need. For the first time in years, Lauren felt a sense of peace settle over her. Here, in this house filled with warmth and kindness, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. The first few weeks in Daniel's home were a mixture of healing and adjustment for Lauren. Each morning, she woke to the soft light filtering through the curtains of her room, Noah nestled peacefully in his crib beside her bed. For the first time in months, she felt safe, truly safe, but that didn't mean the scars of her past had disappeared. They lingered, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for moments of vulnerability to resurface. One night, as rain pattered gently against the windows, Lauren bolted upright in bed, gasping for air. Her heart raced, her skin slick with sweat, as fragments of a nightmare replayed in her mind. She was back at the gas station, alone in the pouring rain, Ethan's taillights disappearing into the darkness. The pain of labor gripped her body again, and she could hear her own desperate cries echoing in the empty night. Lauren? Daniel's voice broke through the haze of panic, pulling her back to reality. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette illuminated by the dim hallway light. His expression was calm but concerned, his presence steady and grounding. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, stepping closer. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to catch her breath. It was just a dream. But it felt so real. Without hesitation, Daniel sat down on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb Noah, who slept soundly despite the commotion. "Do you want to talk about it?" Lauren hesitated, clutching the blanket tightly around her shoulders. Talking about it meant confronting the memories, the betrayal, the fear, the helplessness, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. But something about Daniel's unwavering patience gave her the courage to try. "It's always the same," she admitted quietly, staring down at her trembling hands. "I'm at the gas station again, and Ethan's gone. I can feel the rain, the cold, and then the pain starts. It's like I'm reliving it all over again." Daniel nodded slowly, his gaze filled with empathy. "It sounds like PTSD, he said gently. "What you went through was traumatic, Lauren. It's normal to have nightmares, flashbacks, even anxiety. But you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." His words brought a small measure of comfort, though the weight of her emotions still pressed heavily on her chest. "I hate feeling this way," she whispered bitterly. "Weak. Broken. Like I'll never be able to move on." "You're not weak," Daniel countered firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You survived something unimaginable. That takes strength, real strength. And moving forward isn't going to happen overnight. It's okay to take your time." Lauren nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, to trust that she could rebuild her life piece by piece. But the road ahead seemed impossibly long. Over the next several days, Lauren began to notice subtle changes within herself. With Daniel's encouragement, she started taking small steps toward reclaiming her independence. She spent hours sitting in the rocking chair by the window, reading books borrowed from Daniel's extensive collection. She experimented with cooking simple meals in his kitchen, finding solace in the rhythmic chopping of vegetables and the comforting aroma of simmering sauces. And every evening, she sat with Noah in her arms, marveling at how much he'd grown since those fragile early days in the NICU. But there was one thing missing, a sense of purpose. Before her marriage to Ethan, Lauren had worked as a stylist for a boutique fashion brand, a job she'd loved dearly. It had been her creative outlet, her escape from the pressures of everyday life. But after marrying Ethan, he'd convinced her to quit, insisting she focus on building their perfect life together. Now, as she reflected on those years, Lauren realized how much of herself she'd lost along the way. "I want to get a job," she announced one afternoon, surprising even herself with the conviction in her voice. Daniel looked up from the newspaper he'd been reading at the kitchen table, raising an eyebrow curiously. A job? What kind of job? Something in fashion, Lauren replied, her cheeks flushing slightly as she spoke. Before I met Ethan, I used to work as a stylist. I loved it, it made me feel alive. I don't want to depend on anyone anymore, Daniel. I don't want to be weak. You're not weak, Daniel reminded her gently, setting the newspaper aside. But if getting a job will make you feel stronger, then let's make it happen. I know a few people in the industry, I can help you get started. Lauren's eyes widened in surprise. You'd do that for me? Of course, Daniel said with a warm smile. You deserve to chase what makes you happy. Besides, Noah's going to need stylish clothes when he grows up. Who better to dress him than his mom? Her laughter bubbled out unexpectedly, light and genuine, filling the room with a sound neither of them had heard enough of lately. True to his word, Daniel reached out to some contacts in the fashion world, arranging interviews for Lauren at local boutiques and design studios. At first, she was nervous, terrified, even, about stepping back into a professional environment after so many years away. What if she wasn't good enough anymore? What if no one took her seriously? But Daniel remained by her side throughout the process, offering advice, encouragement, and reassurance whenever her confidence wavered. You've got this, he told her on the morning of her first interview. Just be yourself. That's more than enough. Lauren smiled faintly, smoothing down the blouse she'd chosen carefully from Daniel's guest closet. Thanks. For everything. The interview went better than she could have hoped. The boutique owner, a kind woman named Rachel, immediately recognized Lauren's passion for fashion and offered her a part-time position on the spot. As Lauren walked out of the store later that day, clutching the offer letter in her hand, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her, a reminder that she was capable of standing on her own 2 feet again. When she returned to Daniel's house, she found him in the living room, sipping coffee while flipping through a medical journal. He looked up as she entered, his expression lighting up with curiosity. So, he prompted, setting the journal aside. How did it go? Lauren grinned, holding up the letter triumphantly. I got the job. Daniel's face broke into a wide smile, pride shining in his eyes. That's incredible, Lauren. I knew you could do it. For the first time in years, Lauren felt a sense of accomplishment, a glimmer of the confident, independent woman she used to be. And as she settled onto the couch beside Daniel, sharing stories about the interview and making plans for her first day, she realized something else: she wasn't alone anymore. With Daniel's support and her own determination, Lauren was learning to stand again. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Lauren returned home from her second week at the boutique. The air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves, and golden sunlight filtered through the trees lining Daniel's quiet suburban street. She had spent the day styling clients, helping them find outfits that made them feel confident and beautiful, a task that filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As she walked up the driveway, balancing Noah's diaper bag on one shoulder and a tote filled with fabric swatches in the other, she felt lighter than she had in a long time. But the moment she stepped onto the porch, something caught her eye, a figure slumped against the railing, his head bowed low. Her stomach tightened as recognition dawned. It was Ethan. He looked nothing like the polished millionaire she'd once known. His tailored suits were gone, replaced by wrinkled jeans and a faded hoodie. His usually immaculate hair was unkempt, streaked with gray she didn't remember seeing before. Dark circles shadowed his hollow eyes, and his face was covered in stubble, giving him an almost feral appearance. Lauren froze, her heart pounding as conflicting emotions surged within her. Anger. Disgust. Pity. But above all, indifference. Lauren, Ethan croaked, his voice hoarse and trembling as he pushed himself to his feet. I need to talk to you. She stared at him, her grip tightening on the straps of her bags. What are you doing here, Ethan? I lost everything, he admitted, his hands shaking as he ran them through his disheveled hair. The company, the money, Vanessa, she left me too. I have nowhere else to go. Lauren's jaw clenched, her expression unreadable. And you thought coming here was a good idea? After everything you did? I was stupid, Ethan pleaded, taking a hesitant step closer. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. You, Noah. I threw it all away because I was selfish. But I'm sorry, Lauren. Truly sorry. His words hung in the air between them, heavy and desperate. For a moment, Lauren considered letting him speak further, if only to satisfy her curiosity about how far he would go to justify himself. But deep down, she already knew the truth. You're not sorry you left me stranded, she said finally, her voice calm but laced with steel. You're sorry I moved on. You're sorry I survived without you. Ethan flinched, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her words. That's not true. I miss you. I miss us. There is no us, Lauren shot back sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. There hasn't been an us since the night you drove away and left me alone in the rain. Do you even understand what that did to me? What it did to our son? Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she glanced down at Noah, who was sleeping peacefully in his car seat. The sight of him grounded her, reminding her of why she couldn't afford to entertain Ethan's theatrics any longer. You don't get to come here and act like you deserve forgiveness, Lauren continued, her voice steady now. You don't get to show up at my door after ruining my life and expect me to welcome you back with open arms. You made your choice, Ethan. Now live with it. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, he stood there, defeated, his shoulders slumped and his gaze fixed on the ground. Lauren took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she needed to do next. Without another word, she stepped past him and unlocked the front door. Before stepping inside, she turned to look at him one final time. This is where we end, Ethan, she said firmly, her voice devoid of emotion. Don't come back. With that, she closed the door firmly in his face, locking it behind her. The sound echoed through the quiet house, bringing with it a strange sense of closure. Inside, Lauren leaned against the door, her body trembling with a mix of adrenaline and relief. She listened intently, half expecting Ethan to knock or beg her to reconsider. But after several tense moments, she heard his footsteps retreating down the porch steps, followed by the distant crunch of gravel as he walked away. Noah stirred softly in his car seat, drawing Lauren's attention. She knelt beside him, brushing a gentle hand over his tiny cheek. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice softening as tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. We don't need him. We never did. As she cradled her son in her arms, Lauren felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. Ethan's return had been a test, a chance to confront the pain he'd caused and reaffirm the strength she'd found in rebuilding her life. And she had passed. From the kitchen, Daniel appeared, concern etched across his face. Was that Ethan? Lauren nodded, managing a small smile despite the lingering tension. Yeah. But it's over. He's gone. Daniel studied her carefully, searching for any sign that she might be holding back her emotions. When he saw only resolve in her eyes, he relaxed slightly. Good, he said simply, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You handled it perfectly. I couldn't have done it without you, Lauren admitted, her gratitude shining through. Without this place. Without everything you've given me. Daniel shook his head, his expression warm. You did it all on your own, Lauren. I just gave you a safe space to stand while you figured things out. The rest was all you. For the first time in months, Lauren truly believed him. She wasn't the same woman who had stood abandoned in the rain, broken and afraid. She was stronger now, resilient, independent, and determined to build a future worth fighting for. And as she stood there, surrounded by the warmth of Daniel's home and the love of her son, Lauren knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following Ethan's visit passed quietly, almost uneventfully. Lauren threw herself into her new routine with renewed determination, balancing her part-time job at the boutique with caring for Noah and settling into the rhythm of life in Daniel's home. Each day brought small victories, a client complimenting her styling skills, Noah smiling up at her during one of their late-night feedings, or simply enjoying a cup of coffee on the porch while watching the sunrise. But as much as Lauren tried to focus on moving forward, there was something, or rather, someone, she couldn't ignore any longer. Daniel had been more than just a host, he had become her anchor. His steady presence, unwavering kindness, and quiet humor filled the spaces in her life that had once felt empty. Whether it was helping her fold laundry, staying up late to talk about everything and nothing, or teaching her how to make his famous spaghetti carbonara, Daniel seemed to instinctively know what she needed before she even realized it herself. Yet, despite the growing bond between them, Lauren found herself holding back. Love wasn't supposed to be this easy, was it? After everything she'd endured with Ethan, the betrayal, the abandonment, the lies, she couldn't help but wonder if opening her heart again would only lead to more pain. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled lazily in the wind outside, Lauren sat curled up on the couch with a book, Noah asleep in his bassinet nearby. Daniel entered the living room carrying 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate, handing one to her with a warm smile. "Thanks," Lauren said softly, cradling the mug in her hands. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," Daniel replied, sitting down beside her. "Besides, I figured you could use a break after today. You've been working so hard lately." Lauren nodded, sipping the rich, velvety drink. "It's nice to slow down for a bit. Sometimes I forget how exhausting being a mom can be." "You're doing great," Daniel assured her, his tone sincere. "Noah's lucky to have you." Her cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment, and she glanced down at her son, who was sleeping soundly. "I just want to give him the best life possible. He deserves that." "So do you," Daniel added gently, his gaze lingering on her face. Lauren hesitated, caught off guard by the intensity in his eyes. She shifted uncomfortably, setting her mug aside. I don't know what I deserve anymore, honestly. My last relationship ended in disaster, and I'm still figuring out who I am without all the baggage from my marriage." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to figure everything out right now, Lauren. Healing takes time. But I want you to know something, I see you. The real you. Not the version of yourself you think others expect you to be. And I admire you more than I can put into words." Her breath hitched at his confession, her heart racing as she processed what he was saying. "Daniel. I'm not asking for anything," he continued quickly, raising a hand to stop her. "I just needed to say it. You've been through so much, and you've handled it all with such grace and strength. If you're not ready to let anyone else in, I understand. But I want you to know that I care about you, more than I should, probably." Lauren stared at him, her emotions swirling like a storm inside her chest. Part of her wanted to pull away, to protect herself from the vulnerability that came with loving someone again. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, felt drawn to him, comforted by the honesty in his words. "I'm scared," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of trusting the wrong person." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression soft but resolute. "Love isn't about guarantees, Lauren. It's about choosing to trust anyway, even when it feels risky. But I promise you this, I'll never treat you the way Ethan did. You mean too much to me." Tears welled up in Lauren's eyes, spilling over as she reached out to take his hand. "I don't know if I'm ready yet," she confessed, her voice trembling. But I do know that you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me that love doesn't have to control or consume, it can heal." Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time since meeting Daniel, Lauren allowed herself to imagine a future where love wasn't synonymous with fear or dependence. With him, it felt different, gentle, patient, and safe. And though she wasn't ready to fully embrace it yet, she knew she was on the path to finding peace, not just for herself, but for Noah too. As they sat together in comfortable silence, the warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth mingling with the quiet hum of their shared understanding, Lauren realized something important. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about learning to move forward with hope. And maybe, just maybe, Daniel was the person who could help her do exactly that. Months had passed since Ethan's last desperate attempt to worm his way back into Lauren's life. In that time, she had continued to rebuild herself, piece by piece, day by day. Her job at the boutique flourished, her confidence grew, and her bond with Noah deepened with each passing moment. Daniel remained a constant source of support, his quiet strength helping her navigate the challenges of single motherhood while rediscovering who she was outside of her past relationship. But just when Lauren thought she'd finally left Ethan behind for good, he resurfaced, not in person this time, but through a barrage of legal papers delivered to her doorstep. It was a crisp November morning when the envelope arrived, its contents sealed with an air of menace. Lauren stared at it for several long moments, her heart pounding as she debated whether to open it. Finally, with trembling hands, she tore it open and began to read. Ethan was suing for joint custody of Noah. Her stomach churned as she skimmed the document, anger bubbling beneath the surface. How dare he? After abandoning them both, after everything he'd done, he had the audacity to claim any role in their lives? What is it? Daniel asked, stepping into the kitchen just in time to see Lauren crumple the papers in her fist. It's Ethan, she spat bitterly, thrusting the crumpled pages toward him. He's trying to take me to court for custody of Noah. Daniel's jaw tightened as he scanned the documents, his expression darkening with each line. This is ridiculous. He has no grounds for this. You've been the one raising Noah since day one. I know that, Lauren snapped, pacing anxiously across the room. But that's not the point. He's not doing this because he cares about Noah. He's doing it to punish me, to drag me back into his mess and make me look weak again. Daniel set the papers down on the counter and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than he thinks, Lauren. And you're not alone in this. We'll fight back together. The media circus that followed was predictable yet infuriating. Ethan, ever the manipulator, launched a carefully orchestrated PR campaign designed to paint himself as the victim, a loving father unfairly denied access to his child. Interviews flooded television networks and social media platforms, where Ethan tearfully recounted his regret over leaving Lauren and vowed to be a better man for Noah's sake. He deserves a father in his life, Ethan declared during one particularly nauseating segment on a popular morning show. I may have made mistakes, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Public opinion swayed briefly in his favor, with some commentators questioning Lauren's ability to raise Noah on her own. The hashtag Fairness for Noah began trending online, fueled by supporters who believed Ethan deserved a second chance. Lauren watched it all unfold from the safety of Daniel's living room, her blood boiling with every lie Ethan told. But instead of retreating into silence, she decided to fight back, not with anger, but with truth. With Daniel's encouragement, Lauren agreed to sit down for an exclusive interview with a trusted journalist. Sitting nervously in front of the camera, Noah asleep in her arms, she spoke candidly about her experiences, the night Ethan abandoned her, the struggles she faced as a single mother, and the joy she found in rebuilding her life. Ethan doesn't want to be a father, Lauren said firmly, her voice steady despite the weight of emotion behind it. He wants control. He wants to use Noah as a pawn in his game, just like he used me. But I won't let him win. My son deserves better than someone who only shows up when it benefits him." Her words resonated deeply, sparking a wave of renewed public support. Hashtags like #StandWithLauren and #ProtectNoah began trending alongside clips of her interview, overshadowing Ethan's fabricated narrative. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing, reporters and spectators alike eager to witness the final showdown between Lauren and Ethan. Dressed in a simple yet elegant navy blue dress, Lauren sat beside her lawyer, her posture straight and her expression calm. Beside her, Daniel offered silent reassurance, his presence grounding her amidst the chaos. Ethan, on the other hand, looked haggard and disheveled, his once charismatic demeanor replaced by desperation. As the proceedings unfolded, it became clear that his case lacked substance. There was no evidence of him attempting to provide financial or emotional support for Noah. His claims of wanting to be a father rang hollow against the backdrop of his actions, or lack thereof. When it was Lauren's turn to testify, she spoke with clarity and conviction, recounting the events of that fateful night and detailing the steps she had taken to build a stable, loving environment for her son. Her testimony was bolstered by character witnesses, including Daniel, Rachel, her boss, and even the nurse who had cared for Noah in the NICU. By the time the judge delivered their verdict, there was little doubt about the outcome. Based on the evidence presented, the judge announced, addressing the court, "It is clear that the plaintiff, Mr. Ethan Mitchell, has failed to demonstrate any meaningful commitment to his parental responsibilities. Custody will remain solely with the defendant, Ms. Lauren Mitchell. Furthermore, due to Mr. Mitchell's egregious conduct, supervised visitation is denied unless significant progress is demonstrated in future evaluations." A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom as the ruling sank in. Ethan slumped in his seat, defeated, while Lauren exhaled a shaky breath, tears of relief streaming down her face. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Lauren, eager for a statement. She paused briefly, clutching Noah tightly to her chest before addressing the crowd. "This isn't just a victory for me, it's a victory for anyone who has ever been told they aren't strong enough to stand on their own," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "Love shouldn't hurt. It shouldn't trap you or tear you down. Real love empowers you to become the best version of yourself. And that's exactly what I intend to give my son." As the cameras flashed and the reporters shouted questions, Lauren turned away, walking confidently toward Daniel, who waited patiently by their car. Together, they drove off into the crisp autumn afternoon, leaving Ethan, and the ghosts of her past, far behind. For the first time in years, Lauren felt truly free. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came a sense of renewal for Lauren. The courtroom victory had been more than just a legal win, it was the final chapter in her journey toward reclaiming her life. Free from Ethan's shadow, she felt an unshakable sense of purpose blooming within her, like the first buds of flowers breaking through frost-kissed soil. Lauren sat at the dining table one sunny morning, sketching designs on a notepad while Noah played happily with his toys on the living room rug. Her mind buzzed with ideas, soft pastel onesies adorned with whimsical animal prints, cozy blankets embroidered with motivational phrases, and tiny hats shaped like animals' ears. For years, she'd dreamed of creating something uniquely hers, but fear and self-doubt had always held her back. Now, those fears seemed laughably small compared to everything she'd overcome. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" Daniel asked, leaning against the doorway with a mug of coffee in hand. Lauren glanced up, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I have to. It feels right. Like it's what I'm meant to be doing." Daniel smiled warmly, taking a sip of his coffee. "I think it's brilliant. You've got the talent, the drive, and most importantly, the heart for it. If anyone can make it work, it's you." Her cheeks flushed slightly at his praise, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. Over the past few months, she'd spent countless hours researching fabric suppliers, drafting business plans, and even teaching herself how to use design software. With Daniel's encouragement, and occasional late-night brainstorming sessions over pizza, she'd slowly pieced together the foundation of what would become her own baby clothing line, Little Roots. "It's scary, though," Lauren admitted, setting her pencil down and leaning back in her chair. "What if no one likes it? What if I fail?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Daniel replied simply, stepping closer to place a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But I don't think that's going to happen. People are going to love your designs because they come from a place of authenticity. That's rare these days." His confidence in her was infectious, and Lauren found herself smiling despite her lingering doubts. "Thanks, Daniel. I don't know where I'd be without you." "You'd still be amazing," he said with a grin. "I'm just here to cheer you on from the sidelines." By summer, Lauren's hard work began to pay off. She launched Little Roots online, starting with a modest collection of handmade pieces inspired by Noah's playful personality. Each item was crafted with care, from the soft organic fabrics to the intricate embroidery detailing. To her delight, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Orders poured in from across the country, and soon, local boutiques began reaching out to stock her designs in their stores. One evening, as Lauren packed orders in the guest bedroom-turned-studio, Daniel walked in carrying a tray of snacks and 2 glasses of lemonade. "You've earned a break," he said, setting the tray down on a nearby table. "Come sit for a minute." Lauren laughed softly, wiping her hands on her apron before joining him on the floor. "I can't stop now. There's so much to do." "And you're doing it all beautifully," Daniel countered, handing her a glass of lemonade. "But even superheroes need to recharge sometimes." She rolled her eyes playfully but accepted the drink, savoring the cool tang of citrus as it slid down her throat. "I guess I could take 5 minutes." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Noah crawl around the room, giggling as he tried, and failed, to catch a stuffed bunny. "You know," Lauren said after a while, her tone thoughtful, "I never thought I'd be here. Running my own business, raising Noah on my own, being happy again. After everything that happened, I didn't think happiness was possible anymore." "It's not about forgetting the bad stuff," Daniel replied gently. "It's about letting it shape you into someone stronger. Someone who knows exactly what they want, and deserves it." Lauren nodded, her gaze drifting to Noah, who had finally managed to grab hold of the bunny and was now hugging it triumphantly. "He's my reason for everything," she murmured. "Every decision I make, every risk I take, it's all for him." "And for yourself," Daniel added softly. "Don't forget that part." She looked at him then, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You're good at reminding me of things I tend to overlook." "That's what friends are for," he said with a wink, though there was a flicker of something deeper in his expression, something Lauren chose not to dwell on just yet. Meanwhile, Ethan had faded into obscurity, a forgotten relic of his own arrogance. His attempts to rebuild his empire faltered when investors refused to associate with his tarnished reputation. Rumors swirled about him living in a dingy apartment on the outskirts of town, drowning his failures in cheap whiskey and solitude. Occasionally, Lauren would see glimpses of his name in tabloids or gossip columns, but they barely registered. He was no longer part of her story. As autumn approached once more, Lauren celebrated her first full year of independence with a small gathering at Daniel's house. Friends from the boutique, neighbors, and even some loyal customers joined her for an afternoon filled with laughter, food, and heartfelt conversations. Noah toddled around the backyard, chasing leaves and squealing with delight as Daniel chased him back. Standing on the porch, watching the scene unfold before her, Lauren felt a profound sense of peace. This was her life now, not perfect, but whole. She had built it piece by piece, brick by brick, with nothing but determination and love. And as she raised her glass in a quiet toast to the future, she knew one thing for certain: whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on. Because she wasn't alone anymore. The crisp air of late autumn carried a hint of winter's approach as Lauren stood on Daniel's porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of amber and lavender, casting a warm glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Inside the house, Noah giggled as he played with his toys, blissfully unaware of the whirlwind of emotions swirling within his mother. Lauren had spent the past year rebuilding her life, brick by brick, dream by dream. She had started her business, raised her son, and found a strength within herself she never knew existed. But there was one thing she hadn't fully confronted yet, her feelings for Daniel. He had been her rock through every storm, her steady presence when the world felt uncertain. Yet, despite the undeniable connection between them, Lauren had hesitated to let herself fall completely. Love, after all, had once been a source of pain, a chain that bound her to someone who didn't deserve her trust or devotion. But now, standing here under the fading light of day, Lauren realized something important. Not all love was meant to imprison. Some love set you free. Hey, Daniel's voice called softly from behind her, pulling her out of her thoughts. She turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat at the sight of his familiar smile. He held 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate, offering one to her with a playful raise of his eyebrow. "I thought you might need this," he said, nodding toward the cooling evening air. "It's getting chilly." "Thanks," Lauren replied, accepting the mug with a grateful smile. She wrapped her hands around it, savoring the warmth seeping into her fingers. They stood side by side in comfortable silence, gazing out at the darkening sky. For a moment, neither spoke, content simply to share the stillness of the moment. But Lauren knew she couldn't keep her feelings bottled up any longer. "Daniel," she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. He prompted, glancing at her curiously. I don't know how to say this without sounding ridiculous," she admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly as she avoided his gaze. "You can tell me anything," Daniel assured her, his tone gentle but encouraging. Lauren took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she needed to say. "I think I've been afraid to admit it, to myself, especially, but I care about you. A lot. More than I should, probably." Daniel's expression softened, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "That doesn't sound ridiculous at all." "It doesn't?" Lauren asked, surprised by his calm reaction. "No," he replied, setting his mug down on the railing and turning to face her fully. "Because I feel the same way, Lauren. I have for a while now." Her breath hitched at his confession, her heart racing as she processed his words. "But, aren't you worried? After everything I've been through, with Ethan, with my marriage, I'm not exactly an open book. I'm complicated, Daniel. Messy. So am I," he countered with a soft laugh. "Everyone is, in their own way. But loving someone isn't about ignoring the mess, it's about embracing it. It's about choosing to stand beside them, no matter what." Tears welled up in Lauren's eyes, spilling over as she struggled to hold back the flood of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I don't want to lose myself again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want to feel trapped." "You won't," Daniel promised, reaching out to gently wipe away her tears. "Love shouldn't feel like chains, Lauren. It should feel like wings, like freedom. With me, you'll always have space to grow, to dream, to be whoever you want to be. That's what real love is." His words struck a chord deep within her, resonating with everything she'd come to understand about herself and her journey. For so long, she had equated love with sacrifice, with giving up pieces of herself to make someone else happy. But Daniel showed her a different kind of love, one built on mutual respect, trust, and unwavering support. "I believe you," Lauren murmured finally, her voice filled with quiet certainty. "And I think I'm ready to try again." Daniel's smile widened, his eyes shining with relief and affection. You won't regret it, he said softly, pulling her into a tender embrace. For the first time in years, Lauren allowed herself to fully lean into someone else, to let go of the fear and doubt that had weighed her down for so long. As Daniel held her close, she felt a sense of peace wash over her, a reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep in his crib, Lauren and Daniel found themselves sitting together on the couch, bathed in the soft glow of the fireplace. The room was quiet except for the occasional crackle of logs burning in the hearth. Without saying a word, Daniel reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. Lauren looked up at him, her heart pounding as their eyes met. There was no hesitation this time, no lingering fear or uncertainty. Only clarity. Slowly, Daniel leaned in, brushing his lips against hers in a kiss that was both tender and profound. It wasn't rushed or desperate, instead, it felt like a promise, a vow to honor each other's hearts and dreams. When they finally pulled apart, Lauren rested her forehead against his, a shy smile playing on her lips. That was nice, she teased, earning a chuckle from Daniel. Just nice, he teased back, his thumb brushing lightly across her cheek. Perfect, she corrected, her voice soft but sincere. As they sat there together, wrapped in the warmth of each other's arms, Lauren realized that true love wasn't about finding someone who completed you, it was about finding someone who celebrated the person you already were. And in Daniel, she had found exactly that. The first snow of the season blanketed the world in a serene hush, transforming Daniel's suburban neighborhood into a winter wonderland. Lauren stood on the porch, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket, her breath visible in the frosty air as she watched flakes drift lazily from the sky. Beside her, Noah sat bundled up in his stroller, giggling and reaching out to catch the falling snowflakes with chubby little hands. It had been nearly 2 years since that fateful night at the gas station, the night that had shattered her old life and forced her to rebuild a new one from scratch. So much had changed since then. She was no longer the woman who had stood abandoned in the rain, broken and afraid. She was stronger now, resilient, independent, and unapologetically herself. As she reflected on her journey, Lauren felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for where she was now, but for everything she had endured to get here. Pain had taught her things joy never could. Loss had shown her what truly mattered. And love, when it came again, had reminded her that happiness wasn't something you waited for, it was something you built with your own hands. Thinking about something heavy? Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts, warm and teasing as he stepped onto the porch carrying 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa. Lauren smiled faintly, accepting the mug he offered. Just thinking about how far I've come. How far we've come. Daniel nodded, leaning against the railing beside her. It's been quite the ride, hasn't it? It has, Lauren agreed, taking a sip of the rich, velvety drink. Sometimes I look back and can't believe I survived all of it. The betrayal, the fear, the uncertainty. It feels like another lifetime. You did more than survive, Daniel said softly, his gaze steady and full of admiration. You thrived, Lauren. You took everything that tried to break you and turned it into fuel for something beautiful. Your business, your relationship with Noah, and even this, he gestured between them, his tone light but sincere. None of it would have happened if you hadn't chosen to keep going. Lauren looked down at her mug, her fingers tracing the rim thoughtfully. I used to think happiness was something people gave you. Like if you found the right partner or achieved some big goal, everything would magically fall into place. But I know now that's not true. What is it, then? Daniel asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Happiness isn't something you're given, Lauren replied, her voice soft but resolute. It's something you create. Out of love, out of effort, out of choosing to see the good even when it feels impossible. Daniel smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. And you created yours. Her heart swelled at his words, warmth spreading through her chest despite the cold air. We created ours, she corrected gently, glancing over at Noah, who was now babbling happily to himself as he played with his mittened hands. Daniel followed her gaze, his smile widening as he watched the toddler. Yeah. We did. They stood there for a while longer, savoring the quiet beauty of the moment. The snow continued to fall, muffling the sounds of the world beyond their little bubble of peace. Eventually, Daniel reached out to take Lauren's hand, his touch firm yet gentle. You know, he began, his tone thoughtful, a lot of people think strength means avoiding pain. That if you're strong enough, nothing bad will ever happen to you. Lauren nodded slowly, understanding exactly what he meant. But that's not true, is it? Strength isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning to rise from it. To keep moving forward, no matter how hard it gets. Exactly, Daniel said, squeezing her hand lightly. And you, Lauren Mitchell, are the strongest person I know. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of pride, of hope, of sheer relief at having finally found her footing in a world that once felt so cruel. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Lauren, Daniel, and Noah gathered on the porch steps. Lauren held Noah securely in her lap, his tiny body snuggled against hers as he drifted off to sleep. Daniel sat beside them, his arm draped casually around Lauren's shoulders, anchoring her to the present moment. The three of them sat in silence, watching the sunset together, a perfect snapshot of family, love, and resilience. For Lauren, it was a reminder that life wasn't defined by the storms you weathered, but by the calm you found afterward. In that moment, she realized something profound. Strength wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up every time you did. And happiness? Happiness wasn't a destination. It was a choice. A decision to embrace the beauty of the present, even when the past still lingered in your memory. As the screen fades to black, Lauren's voice echoes softly, addressing the audience directly. To anyone watching who feels lost, hurt, or broken, I want you to know this: you are stronger than you think. Life may knock you down, but it's also filled with moments of grace, love, and second chances if you're willing to reach for them. Strength isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning to rise from it. And when you do, you'll discover that happiness isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. The final image shows the trio silhouetted against the golden glow of the setting sun, a symbol of hope, healing, and the promise of brighter days ahead. At its heart, this story is about resilience, the kind of resilience that lives within each of us, even when we don't realize it. Lauren's journey reminds us that life doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes, it throws storms our way, leaving us stranded in the rain, unsure of how to move forward. But it's not the storm that defines us, it's how we rise from it. Lauren taught us that happiness isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. It's about finding strength in vulnerability, choosing love over fear, and building a life that reflects who you truly are. Her story shows us that no matter how broken you feel, there's always a way to rebuild, and often, the most beautiful things come from the hardest beginnings. But here's the truth: stories like Lauren's aren't just meant to inspire, they're meant to remind you of your own power. Maybe you're facing challenges right now, feeling lost or overwhelmed. If so, take a page from Lauren's book, keep going. Even the smallest steps forward can lead to the biggest breakthroughs. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think, feel, or believe in yourself just a little bit more, we'd love for you to join us on this journey. There are more stories waiting to be told, more lessons to learn, and more moments of hope to share. So don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when our next story drops. Because every story matters, and yours might just be the one we tell next. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for believing in the power of resilience. We'll see you in the next chapter.